Have you ever sat down and thought to yourself, how the hell does the biggest film franchise of all time, with the most films, have almost zero characters you actually remember? Holy cow, dude, it's almost impressive. Like the studios are trying in a lab to make these characters forgettable. Look at the Monsterverse, right? A franchise with now 3 Godzilla movies. You don't know Millie Bobby Brown's character's name. You don't know Brian Tyree Henry's character's name. Nobody. And spoilers, it's because Godzilla, stick with me, he's not a character. Fun fact, he's not a real character. It'll make sense, just wait. What I mean by that is that he has none of the traits characters have. And that's because even though movies treat him as a character, he is not one. In fact, there's a story device I think fits the bill a lot better for the big guy, and that's a setting. That's right, Godzilla, not a character, he's a setting. Webster Dictionary defines a character as someone who appears in a book, movie, etc., a representation of an individual personality in a fictional or dramatic work. Yes, he is a someone who appears in a movie, but a representation of an individual personality? I think not. Let's take it back to 1954 with the first ever Godzilla movie. I can prove Godzilla isn't a character because not only does he not represent an individual personality, and that's because in fact he represents something bigger, something more vague, an idea. It's important to know the origins of Godzilla when discussing him. In fact, I'd say he's one of the most historically interesting things to ever come out of film. Godzilla represents America and also is an allegory for nuclear weapons. Something your history book should have taught you is pretty significant to Japan in the 40s, 50s. The nukes wake up Godzilla, and from there he's a big rage monster that shows the dangers of war and science when they go too far. Godzilla doesn't have a personality. Sure, he feels emotions, but so do other settings. You can say feeling direct emotions like Pandora, and then a more vague emotion like that of hope or fear in Gotham City. Too many movies treat Godzilla like he's one of the main characters, and that's so silly. It's like treating Rexy from Jurassic Park as one of the big main characters. In fact, let's take a second to talk about Jurassic Park. That movie has memorable characters, even though they're surrounded by dinosaurs. And that's because they have personalities outside of surviving Jurassic Park. Characters in Godzilla movies, the most interesting thing about them is that they're in a Godzilla movie. This puts some of these movies in a weird limbo state where the movie says, let's not develop our characters because people only care about Godzilla. To an extent, I actually think Pandora is pretty similar. Because really the main reason people go to see the Avatar movies is so that they can say, whoa, look how pretty it is. And while they're better than Godzilla, I don't think anyone really loves those Avatar characters, you know, Jake Sully's my hero. Jurassic Park 100% balances having interesting characters in an arguably more interesting setting, because the characters are still unique and can stand on their own outside of Jurassic Park. And if you disagree, point made. You might say to yourself, who even cares? People only go to see these movies for the monsters. We want to see Godzilla fight. And look, I'm human, right? I get it. That's why I'm there too. The monster fights are great and save so many of these movies, many of which I think are pretty decent. The problem is, we've seen it before. We've seen Godzilla fight Mothra and Mechagodzilla and Rodan and Gigan, Destroya, Jet Jaguar, everybody at this point. At some point, in order for a movie to stand out, they have to give us more than just a fight, especially when most of the movie is spent with the humans. Let's say the movie is 2 hours, right? And 60 minutes is dedicated to the monster fights, which is insane. First of all, that would never happen. But second of all, that's still an hour of time dedicated to the human characters people don't care that much about. Movies are meant to give us emotion, and when the draw and reason people go to see these movies is largely without emotion, it makes it super hard to resonate with. People say spend more time with monsters, spend more time so we can see the monsters fight. And it's tough because I'm sure the studio wants to fulfill that demand from the audience, but it also hurts the human characters because we spend less time with them. And therefore, it makes it even harder to establish a connection. Fear not, people. When I said human characters never work in Godzilla films, I actually mean 99.9% of the time. Let's look at the 2 examples of human characters done right. Number 1, Bryan Cranston is easily the best part of Godzilla 2014. And that's because, well, I mean, let's be honest, he's Bryan Cranston. But second of all, because he has his own interesting story that is caused by Godzilla, but not reliant on him. A great example of immersing an interesting character in an even more interesting environment. His wife dies as a result of Godzilla's awakening, and from there, he just wants to know what happened. Godzilla pushes the domino and then says, "Go crazy, go do your thing, you got this." Let's take a look at another example in Godzilla Minus One. Maybe the best Godzilla film of all time and easily the best human character. Here our main character is an ex-kamikaze pilot who never went through with this task, and because of that he feels a lot of guilt for not helping his people in the war. He's ashamed, persecuted, and throughout the film, the emergence of Godzilla gives him the opportunity to step up and be brave, really make a difference for those around him. Here, he's already interesting without Godzilla. Take the big lizard out, and the story of this ex-kamikaze pilot dealing with that guilt, that's still interesting on its own. Godzilla is a vehicle to help get his story from point A to point B. The arc of the character is in no shape or form reliant on Godzilla or interesting because of him. Go see this movie too, it's freaking amazing. Well everyone, that's my TED Talk. Treat Godzilla like a setting because that's what he is. Allow the characters to use Godzilla as a device to tell their stories. Don't just make them time fillers between big kaiju fights. Godzilla should be there to help the characters be interesting, but he can't be the only thing that makes them interesting. Balance it out better and use this amazing setting to their advantage.